My next guest is someone who has experienced the horrors of child marriage. Kate Yang was sold into an abusive child marriage for $6,000 in her home state of Washington by her family when she was just 12 years old. Something that is not uncommon in the Indigenous culture of the Hmong, an ethnic group from Southeast Asia. Kate joins me now. Kate, thank you so much for your time tonight. Tell me about how you came to be sold into an abusive marriage at just 12 years of age and how something like this could happen in Washington State.
Well, the thing is that in Washington State and a lot of states actually, there's not laws to protect children from being sold into child marriages. For my situation, I actually grew up in Fresno, California. When I was the age of 11, my family had me move to Washington to live with relatives. And then when I moved to Washington, I was only at the age of 11 and I was living with an aunt and an uncle. And my aunt was actually the one who found me the child marriage and coerced me into it and forced me into the child marriage.
You were not only a child bride, your childhood just seems to be such a horrific experience. You were also essentially a child slave. Tell me about what you were forced to do to pay off your parents' debt.
Yes. So basically, when I was given less than 24-hour notice that I was moving to Washington, and then my mother shared with me that like I had to come live with my aunt and uncle because I had to pay off a debt. Because when I was a child, my mom was a single mother, and in my culture, a husband can have more than one wife, and daughters are just meant to be sold off for a dowry, and unless you're a son, then you carry the last name and you are treated differently by the family and the community. And you're kind of put on a pedestal if you're a son. And so when I moved to Washington to live with my aunt and uncle, my mom told me I had to pay a debt because when my mom was single, my aunt and uncle had to help my mom raise us. And so therefore, I had to return the debt by helping my aunt and my uncle with their children, raising their 5 kids under the age of 6. And so moving to Washington was extremely difficult. Taking on that huge responsibility, being away from my mother was extremely difficult. I had a very rough childhood, so I really didn't know what to do with the situation. And also during that time, it's very scary because you're a child and you don't know, and you're in a new environment. You don't know who you can trust, especially when you've endured a lot of abuse growing up, and also seeing your mother being abused by your father as well. You know, that's something I had to live through. And so after I was put in my child marriage, um, the family that I was married to, they sell flowers at the Pike Place Market in Seattle. And so their family has been one of the first Hmong families to sell flowers at the Pike Place Market for a very, very long time. And so this is a family business. They grow their own flowers. They sell the fresh flowers there at the farmers market and also the Pike Place Market, which is famous for in Seattle. And basically, I would have to live a double life. The first um, after my wedding, um, my mother-in-law on my first day of school, right, she told me, she said that if I go to school, I'm not allowed to talk about my child marriage to anybody. My mother-in-law told me that if I was to share this news with anybody, then my mother would be arrested by the police, and my sisters would be taken by the CPS, and I would never see them again. So if you just think about the mindset of a child at the age of 12. I just barely turned 12 because my birthday's in October. So, and my wedding was in February, right? So I just turned 12. And so I had all this fear that if I spoke about it, then I would be, my problems would come to my mother and my siblings, and I would never see them again. So I kept my silence to protect my family. And so I stayed. And so ever since my mother-in-law said that to me, I was just so frightened. I didn't know what would happen to me or who would take care of me. And so it was very scary time in my life, and I did my best to work through it, but it was extremely challenging. And because my in-laws had a farm, I was forced to work on the farm as well as a child. I call it child slave because I didn't have the right, to resist or not, right? I had to live a double life, meaning that I'd go to seventh grade and pretend that I'm a normal 7th grader. The school allowed me to be enrolled using his parents as my parents. I would call his parents mom and dad. His parents were on my registration when they enrolled me into Tulp Middle School in Carnation, Washington, and so nobody asked any questions at all. And I think a lot of it too is that Americans or I would say other people are afraid to ask sometimes because they don't want to be rude. But I feel like in this, now that we know, my whole purpose behind this is that I would like people to ask more questions, because a lot of time these children are subjected to child bride or slavery. And if you don't ask questions, how would you know how to help them, or how would you know that they actually are in an abusive situation and they need help, right? Yeah, so that's one thing that I
Absolutely.
definitely
And
struggle with.
you know this is an issue in the community you come from, and there are other girls who are in the same situation right now. How do you encourage them to seek help? Because you've got all those threats hanging over your head, all those fears, everything you experienced. And how have you talked with lawmakers to try to change the laws to make it easier for these girls to escape these abusive relationships?
Well, my advice to anybody who is a victim and survivor who needs help would be to reach out. Um, the whole purpose of my advocacy work is to let survivors know that I've been there and I've been through it and I've survived. I'm here, and I'm essentially calling out to them, letting them know that help is here. And please don't be afraid to come forward. Reach out to myself on my social media account, or Unchained at Last. Unchained at Last is actually a nonprofit organization that I work with. They're Unchained at Last and also Zonta. These are the two nonprofits that actually sponsors the House bills in America to pass the House bills. And so I'm working closely with these nonprofits to help pass the bills, meeting with legislators, rallying, lobbying. This is all very new to me. I'm very new into my advocacy role. I'm a year and a half in, and I've learned so much, all the work and efforts that it takes to pass a bill. In the beginning, I was just triggered and traumatized by my PTSD. I didn't know if I could come forward and share my story publicly. Sharing your story publicly for the first time is so traumatic, and it's just scary. But I realized I needed to do that because um, not every single survivor actually makes it. Not every single survivor survives, and live and make it through the hard times and escape, right? And so for me, it's been 15 years since I escaped my prison. So I feel that I have the strength to do it. I have to find the strength and the courage somewhere to do it. This is the only way that we're going to pass these House bills. This is the only way that we're going to bring light to the issue that's happening here in America and also all over the world. Also, Unchained at Last also works with the United Nations as well. So I'm hoping that as soon as we take care of the problem here in America, then I would definitely love to continue to work with them and help in
You're
child marriage in
doing
all over the world.
incredible. You're, you're doing incredible work, Kate, by just speaking out, the advocacy you're doing. I'm sure you're going to be saving many other girls from the terrible fate that you experienced for 11 years. You were 11 years in that marriage. Kate Yang, thank you so much for your time tonight.